The first package disappeared on a rainy Tuesday. At first, I blamed the delivery driver. The tracking said delivered. Front door. 2:14 p.m. I got home from work 20 minutes later, and the small cardboard box I'd been waiting for all week was nowhere to be found. I checked behind the flower pot, behind the recycling bin, even looked around the porch, thinking maybe the driver had tucked it somewhere to keep it dry. Nothing. I sighed, reported it missing, and moved on. It wasn't expensive anyway. Just headphones. Annoying, but not the end of the world. A week later it happened again. This time it was a package containing a birthday gift for my sister. Same message. Delivered. Same porch. Same empty space. That's when I started paying attention. My name is Levi. I'm 26, and until recently I lived in one of those quiet suburban neighborhoods where nothing interesting ever seemed to happen. The houses all looked almost identical. Tiny front lawns. White fences. People who waved politely without actually knowing each other. The only exception was my neighbor, Isaac. He'd moved into the house next door about 6 months before I did. He was older than me by maybe 2 years. Tall, dark hair that never seemed fully under control, and the kind of calm expression that made him look like he had nowhere urgent to be. We'd exchanged exactly 3 conversations. The first was when I moved in. Need a hand. I looked up to see him standing beside my moving truck. I'm good, I said. You don't look good. He wasn't wrong. I was trying to carry a couch by myself. 10 minutes later we had it inside. Thanks, I said. No problem. That was it. The second conversation happened because one of my sprinklers flooded part of his lawn. My grass is learning how to swim. I apologized. He laughed. Again, that was it. The third conversation lasted less than 30 seconds when we accidentally reached our mailboxes at the same time. Morning. Morning. Quiet guy. Nice enough. Just private. After the second missing package, I bought a cheap doorbell camera. Mostly because everyone online said that was the obvious solution. 3 days later, another delivery arrived. This time I rushed home before opening the app. The package was gone. Perfect. Now I'd finally know who kept stealing them. I opened the recording. The driver walked up, placed the box beside my door, took a picture, left. 2 minutes passed. Nothing happened. Then someone walked into frame wearing a dark hoodie and baseball cap. They picked up my package, walked away. The camera angle only caught the side of their face for half a second. Not enough to identify anyone. Damn it. I replayed the video 6 times. Nothing. The hoodie covered almost everything. Still, there was something oddly familiar about the way the person walked. Relaxed. Hands in pockets. Like they belonged there. I couldn't explain why that bothered me. The next afternoon, I saw Isaac washing his car. He nodded when I came outside. Hey. Hey. I hesitated. Then I asked, have you had any packages stolen? He frowned. No. Seriously? Seriously. Lucky. He looked at me for a second. You? 3. His eyebrows lifted. That's rough. Yeah. He leaned against the side of his car. You should tell the police. I already filed a report. They probably won't do much. I know. There was a brief silence. Then he said, if you want, I can keep an eye out when you're at work. I looked at him. You do that? He shrugged. I'm usually home. Thanks. No problem. Simple. Normal. Helpful. Exactly the sort of thing a good neighbor would say. Which made me feel guilty for noticing something else. His hoodie. Dark gray. Almost identical to the one from the video. I immediately hated myself for thinking it. Half the neighborhood probably owned gray hoodies. It meant nothing, right? The following Friday, I decided to test something. I ordered a cheap phone case. $8. Nothing valuable. The tracking estimated delivery around noon. Instead of going to work, I called in sick. I parked my car 2 streets away so it looked like I wasn't home. Then I waited upstairs, watching through a tiny gap in the blinds. At 12:41, the delivery van arrived. The driver dropped the package on my porch. Left. Silence. 1 minute. 2. 5. Nobody came. I started feeling ridiculous. Maybe the thief only came on certain days. Maybe. Movement. Someone stepped out from between the houses. Gray hoodie. Hands in pockets. My heartbeat jumped. The figure walked directly toward my porch. Picked up the package. Turned. And headed straight toward Isaac's house. No way. I was already halfway downstairs before I realized I wasn't wearing shoes. I yanked open my front door. Hey. The figure froze. Slowly turned around. It wasn't Isaac. It was a teenager. Couldn't have been older than 16. He looked terrified. He dropped the package immediately. Two wasn't. The hell are you doing? Before he could answer, another voice came from next door. Tyler. Isaac. The teenager's face went completely white. Isaac walked calmly across his lawn. No anger. No shouting. Just disappointment. I told you not again. The kid stared at the ground. I'm sorry. Isaac sighed. Then looked at me. I'm guessing that's yours. I nodded slowly. What is going on? Isaac rubbed the back of his neck. My nephew. I blinked. What? He started staying with me last month. The teenager looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. I thought he'd stopped. You knew? Isaac closed his eyes for a moment. I knew he'd stolen things before. My stomach tightened. But I didn't know it was from you. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, Isaac turned toward his nephew. Go inside. The kid disappeared without arguing. Isaac remained standing on my driveway. I'm really sorry. I folded my arms. 3 packages. I know. I filed police reports. I know. You knew he was stealing. I knew he had been. That's not much better. He nodded. It isn't. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked completely exhausted. I'll replace everything. That's not really the point. I know. He looked toward his house. My sister's going through a lot. He stopped himself. I've had Tyler living with me for about 5 weeks. And he's angry. At the world. Mostly. I wanted to stay mad. I really did. But Isaac wasn't making excuses. He wasn't pretending nothing had happened. He simply looked worn out. Like he'd been trying to hold together something much bigger than missing packages. I'm still upset, I admitted. You should be. But I appreciate you being honest. He gave a tired smile. It's easier now that you've caught him. I looked down at the recovered package. Then back at Isaac. Something about him had changed. Or maybe I'd simply never looked closely enough before. For the first time, he didn't feel like the quiet stranger next door. He felt like someone carrying far more than he let anyone see. He stood there for another moment, as if he expected me to say something. I didn't. Not because I had nothing to say. Because I had too much. 3 missing packages. Hours spent talking to customer support. Money wasted. Time wasted. And somehow, I couldn't even enjoy finally knowing who had done it. Isaac looked defeated. I'll pay you back, he said again. I believe you. I'll also return anything Tyler still has. So there were more? He nodded once. I haven't checked his room yet. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. He hadn't known. Or maybe he hadn't wanted to know. There was a difference. I'm sorry, Levi. It was the first time he'd ever used my name. I hadn't realized until then that we'd always just said, hey, or morning. Hearing my name from him felt strangely personal. I know, I replied quietly. He gave me one last apologetic look before walking back toward his house. I watched him disappear inside. Only then did I pick up my package. It suddenly felt ridiculously light. That evening there was a knock on my door. I opened it expecting another delivery. Instead, Isaac stood there holding 2 cardboard boxes. I found these. He held them out. Both had my name on them. One was the missing birthday gift. The other contained a set of books I'd completely forgotten about. I checked his closet. I accepted the boxes. Thank you. There are a few more things. A few. He sighed. Apparently, he didn't just steal from you. I frowned. What do you mean? The woman across the street. My other neighbor. The house at the corner. I blinked. So he's been stealing from everyone. Looks that way. Neither of us seemed to know what to say after that. Finally, I stepped aside. You want some coffee? He looked surprised. I thought you were angry. I am. Then why are you inviting me inside? I shrugged. Because standing on the porch talking about your nephew feels weird. For the first time since I'd met him, he laughed. It wasn't loud. Just quiet and genuine. Fair enough. My house wasn't much to look at. Still half unpacked despite living there for months. Books stacked on the dining table. A bicycle leaning against one wall, because I still hadn't bought a garage rack. Isaac looked around without commenting. I promise I'm usually more organized. I've seen your garage. I stared at him. You've seen my garage? When you leave it open. Oh, so no. I laughed despite myself. You're not wrong. A few minutes later, we sat across from each other with mugs of coffee between us. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then Isaac finally broke the silence. My sister's in rehab. I looked up. I wasn't expecting that. Most people aren't. He wrapped both hands around his mug. Tyler moved in after Child Protective Services got involved. I stayed quiet. I wasn't exactly prepared to become a guardian overnight. I can imagine. He shook his head. I work from home. So everyone assumed it made sense. Does it? No. His answer came immediately. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. There was something strangely comforting about how honest he was. No pretending. No heroic speeches. Just, I don't know. I've never even lived with a teenager before. How old is he? 16. And before this? He bounced between relatives. I nodded slowly. That's rough. It is. I guess stealing packages isn't really the biggest problem. No. He smiled sadly. It isn't. Silence settled between us again. This one wasn't awkward. Just thoughtful. Eventually I asked, why didn't you tell me? He looked confused. About Tyler. When I asked if your packages had been stolen, he stared into his coffee. I was embarrassed. I appreciated the honesty. I would have been too. I kept thinking I could fix it myself. And I couldn't. His eyes finally met mine. I'm not used to failing people. Something about that sentence stayed with me. He hadn't said, I'm not used to failing. He'd said, failing people. There was a difference. A big one. You know, I said. Most people would have just denied everything. I considered it. Really? For about 3 seconds. What changed your mind? You looked so relieved when you finally caught someone. He smiled faintly. I couldn't let you believe it was some stranger after that. I leaned back in my chair. I appreciate that. I figured you deserved the truth. You were right. He nodded once, then looked toward my bookshelf. You read a lot. I buy more books than I finish. Same. I laughed. You don't seem like a fantasy guy. I'm not. What then? History. Seriously? Mostly biographies. I smiled. I would have guessed crime novels. Too unrealistic. History is realistic. It already happened. I can't argue with that. For the next half hour, we somehow stopped talking about stolen packages entirely. Books. Movies. The neighborhood. The terrible pizza place 5 minutes away. By the time Isaac stood to leave, I realized something unexpected. This was the longest conversation I'd had with anyone since moving into the neighborhood. At the front door, he hesitated. I know this started in a terrible way. I nodded. But he searched for the right words. I'm glad we finally talked. That caught me off guard. So am I. He smiled. A small one. The kind that barely reached his lips, but completely changed his face. Good night, Levi. Good night, Isaac. After he walked home, I stood in my doorway longer than necessary. 3 days earlier, I would have described him as the quiet guy next door. Now I knew he spent his days working from home while trying to raise a teenager he never expected to be responsible for. And somehow, that made the gray hoodie seem completely insignificant. For the first time since the missing packages started, I wasn't thinking about what had been stolen. I was thinking about the neighbor I'd never really bothered to know. The next morning, I woke up to someone ringing my doorbell. Not knocking, holding the button down like the house was on fire. I opened the door to find Tyler standing there. He looked miserable, dark circles under his eyes, hands shoved into the pockets of the same gray hoodie that had caused me so much frustration. He couldn't have looked less like a criminal. You got a minute? He asked. I hesitated, then nodded. Come in. He stayed near the doorway instead. I won't take long. Okay. He stared at the floor. My uncle made me come over. I figured. He said apologizing because he told me to isn't really apologizing. He's right. Tyler sighed. I know. Another long silence. Finally, he looked up. I'm sorry. There wasn't any dramatic speech. No excuses. No attempt to blame someone else. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. I believed him. Not because the apology was perfect. Because it sounded uncomfortable. Real apologies usually do. I appreciate that. I'll pay you back. You have a job? He actually laughed. No. Then don't worry about it. My uncle said you'd say that. I smiled despite myself. Your uncle seems to know me pretty well. He said you look angry longer than you actually stay angry. I blinked. He said that. Tyler nodded. He notices people. That sounded exactly like Isaac. Quiet people usually noticed everything. My uncle also said I have to earn your trust. That's going to take a while. I know. He took a deep breath. I wasn't stealing because I needed stuff. I guessed. He struggled to find the words. I like getting away with something. I appreciated the honesty. Does your uncle know that? Yeah. What did he say? Tyler shrugged. He said being honest is a better place to start than lying. Again, that sounded exactly like Isaac. I'm trying, Tyler added quietly. I can see that. He nodded once, then turned toward the door. I should go. Tyler. He looked back. You picked a really boring package yesterday. What? The phone case. He actually smiled. I know. It was only $8. I felt stupid after opening it. I laughed. So did I. For the first time since we'd met, he looked his age. Just a 16-year-old kid. Confused. Embarrassed. Trying to figure things out. See you around, he said. Hopefully not on my porch. That earned a genuine laugh. I think my uncle would kill me. After he left, I found myself smiling. Not because everything had suddenly become perfect, because maybe things really could get better. That afternoon, I worked from home. Around 3 o'clock, I heard lawn equipment outside. Looking through the window, I saw Isaac trying to repair the fence separating our backyards. Trying being the important word. The wooden panel leaned sideways. The post refused to stay straight. Every time he stepped back to check it, the entire thing tilted again. I watched for nearly 5 minutes before finally giving up. I walked outside. You know that's upside down, right? Isaac looked over his shoulder. It is. Completely. He stared at the fence. That explains a lot. I couldn't help laughing. I thought you said you fix things. I work with computers. Oh, Wood doesn't usually argue with me. It seems to be winning. It absolutely is. I climbed over the small gap between our yards. Move. You know what you're doing? My dad renovated houses. Seriously? I spent every summer holding tools. He stepped aside without arguing. 10 minutes later, the post was straight. The fence stood exactly where it was supposed to. Isaac folded his arms. I hate how easily you did that. I hate how impressed you look. I'm very impressed. Buy me pizza. He smiled. Done. The good place. That's expensive. You offered. I was hoping you'd pick the terrible one. I have standards. I can see that. We walked to the pizza place together an hour later. Not the terrible one. The better restaurant across town. It was the first time we'd been anywhere together that wasn't one of our houses. As soon as we sat down, Isaac looked oddly uncomfortable. What? He shook his head. Nothing. You've made that face 3 times already. What face? The one where you're thinking too hard. He looked down at the menu. I'm just realizing something. What? We've lived next to each other for months. Yeah. And it took my nephew stealing your packages for us to actually become friends. I laughed. When you say it like that, it's a terrible origin story. It really is. But memorable, I guess. The waitress came over to take our order. After she left, Isaac leaned back in his chair. I owe you another apology. For what? I've been avoiding people. I frowned. You have. He nodded. Since Tyler moved in. Why? I was afraid someone would ask how things were going. And I didn't have a good answer. I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. So you stayed home. Mostly. You looked lonely. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Isaac looked surprised. I did. Sometimes. He smiled softly. I was. Something settled quietly between us. Not awkwardness. Recognition. We'd both been living only a few feet apart. Both thinking the other preferred being alone. Maybe we'd both been wrong. When dinner arrived, the conversation drifted to easier topics again. Favorite movies. Vacation disasters. The worst jobs we'd ever had. I learned Isaac had once worked night shifts stocking grocery shelves while finishing college. He learned I'd accidentally set off a fire alarm in my apartment building trying to make popcorn. You burn popcorn? I forgot it existed. For how long? 8 minutes. He laughed so hard the people at the next table looked over. I didn't know popcorn could burn for 8 minutes. Neither did the firefighters. Oh no. Oh yes. He was still laughing when we left the restaurant. Walking home beside him felt strangely natural. Comfortable. Neither of us talked for several minutes. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was easy. As we reached our houses, Isaac stopped at the edge of the driveway. Thanks. For dinner. For fixing the fence. For talking. He smiled. I haven't laughed that much in a while. I looked at him. The evening sun caught the edges of his dark hair, and for the first time I noticed how different he looked when he smiled without forcing it. Lighter. You should do it more often, I said. He held my gaze for a second longer than usual. I think I probably will. Over the next 2 weeks, seeing Isaac became part of my routine. Not because we planned it. It just happened. Some mornings we'd reach our mailboxes at the same time. Other days he'd wave from his porch while I watered the plants I'd been trying and mostly failing to keep alive. Once he texted me a picture of my trash can halfway down the street after the garbage truck had knocked it over. Thought you'd want this before it becomes someone else's. I replied with a picture of his garden hose stretching across his driveway. Thought you'd want this before you accidentally clothesline yourself. He answered with a single message. Rude. I laughed out loud. The strange thing was that Isaac wasn't much of a texter. Most of his replies were only a sentence long, sometimes just one word. But somehow every message sounded exactly like him. Dry, quiet, funny when he wasn't trying. One Saturday afternoon, I was mowing my lawn when Tyler wandered over carrying 2 cans of soda. For you, he said. I shut off the mower. Bribery. My uncle said neighbors do nice things for each other. So this is homework. A little. I accepted the drink anyway. How's school? He made a face. Existing. That bad. I've been to 3 schools in 2 years. I hadn't known that. Making friends isn't exactly easy. No. He kicked lightly at the grass. But it's getting better. Good. My uncle makes me eat dinner at the table every night. The monster. I know. He also asks about my day. Unbelievable. Tyler rolled his eyes dramatically. And he keeps showing up to my soccer games. I smiled. He sounds awful. The worst. There wasn't much conviction behind the complaint. You know, I said, he cares about you. I know. Tyler looked toward his house. He just worries too much. I think that's part of the job. You think? I've never been anyone's guardian. Neither has he. That sentence stayed with me long after Tyler walked away. Neither has he. Isaac wasn't pretending to have everything figured out. He was simply showing up every day and trying. That counted for something. Actually, it counted for a lot. A few evenings later, I heard raised voices through my open kitchen window. Not screaming, just loud enough that I could tell someone was upset. The sound came from next door. I hesitated. It wasn't really my business. Then I heard Tyler. I said I'm sorry. A pause. Isaac answered, his voice calm. I know you are. Then why don't you trust me? Another pause. Longer this time. Finally, Isaac spoke again. Because trust comes back slowly. Silence. Then Tyler again. So what do? You keep giving people reasons to believe you. I stood frozen in my kitchen. There was no anger in Isaac's voice. No lecture. Just patience. I know that's frustrating, he continued. But that's how it works. I quietly closed my window. Some conversations deserve privacy. The following morning, there was another knock on my door. Isaac stood there holding an empty pie dish. I think this belongs to you. I frowned. I've never seen that before. He blinked. Oh. We both looked down at it. Then at each other. Wrong neighbor? I asked. He nodded slowly. I think I accidentally stole Mrs. Henderson's pie. I stared at him. You what? I thought she'd left it on my porch. Isaac. Yes. You accidentally stole a pie. I realize how this sounds. I couldn't stop laughing. He rubbed the back of his neck. I was distracted. By what? I was thinking. Dangerous. I've been told. You've officially committed more theft than Tyler this week. He sighed dramatically. I'm never recovering from this. No. I'll have to apologize. Probably. I hate apologizing. You seem pretty good at it. He smiled. I've had practice. We walked together to Mrs. Henderson's house. She answered the door before we even knocked. There you are. Isaac held up the pie dish. I'm so sorry. She laughed. I wondered where my apple pie disappeared to. I genuinely thought someone left it for me. She looked at him with the kind of smile only older neighbors seem capable of giving. Honey, if I baked you a pie, I'd ring the doorbell. I'll remember that. She waved him off. No harm done. As we walked back home, Isaac shook his head. I'm never living this down. I certainly won't let you. I figured. You accidentally stole a pie. Yes. The irony is incredible. It really is. We reached the sidewalk between our houses. Isaac stopped walking. You know? What? I don't think I've laughed this much in years. His voice was quieter now, more thoughtful. I looked at him. Maybe you just needed someone to laugh with. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at me in a way that made the whole neighborhood seem unusually quiet. I think maybe I did. Neither of us said anything after that. We didn't need to. For a long moment, we simply stood there in the fading evening light. 2 neighbors who had met because of stolen packages, somehow ending up somewhere neither of us had expected. And for the first time, I caught myself wondering what would have happened if that very first package had actually stayed on my porch. Something told me I never would have really met Isaac. And somehow, that thought bothered me far more than the missing deliveries ever had. The question stayed in my head for days. Not because I believed in fate. I didn't. I just couldn't stop thinking about how random everything had been. A missing package. A teenager making bad decisions. An awkward conversation in a driveway. And somehow that chain of events had introduced me to someone I'd lived 20 feet away from for months. Life was strange like that. Monday evening, I came home to find Isaac sitting on his front steps with his laptop balanced on one knee. He looked up as I pulled into my driveway. Working outside. He closed the laptop. Trying. My internet went down. So why the laptop? I keep opening it hoping that somehow fixes the problem. I laughed. Has it worked yet? Shockingly, no. I walked over. Want me to take a look? You know routers? I know enough to unplug things dramatically. He considered that. Honestly, that's about where I am too. 5 minutes later, we were standing in his living room staring at a blinking modem. I already restarted it. Did you wait 30 seconds? I counted to 10. There's your mistake. I knew you were going to judge me. I absolutely am. He folded his arms while I unplugged everything. So, I asked, what do you actually do? For work? Yeah. I design software. I thought you fix computers. I make programs. That sounds harder. It mostly means arguing with code. And the code argues back. Every day. I knew computers were mean. They're incredibly stubborn. I waited a full 30 seconds before plugging everything back in. The lights blinked. The connection returned. Isaac stared at me. That's it. I spent an hour trying to fix this. You rushed the dramatic unplugging. I hate that you're right. I grinned. You owe me. I already bought pizza. Coffee then. You're expensive. Worth it. He looked at me for a moment. I think you might be. The words came out so casually that neither of us reacted immediately. Then silence settled over the room. Isaac blinked. I know what you meant. I don't think you do. I smiled. I probably don't. He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly looking far less confident than usual. It was oddly endearing. So, I said, rescuing him, coffee. Coffee. We walked to a small cafe about 15 minutes away. The place wasn't busy. Just a few people working on laptops and an older couple sharing a slice of cake. Isaac chose a table near the window. You always sit where you can see outside. He looked surprised. How did you know? I've noticed. He smiled faintly. I like watching people. People watching? It reminds me the world's still moving. That sounded deeper than he probably intended. You spend too much time alone. His smile faded slightly. Probably. You work from home. Yeah. You take care of Tyler. Yeah. You don't really go anywhere. No. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to? He thought about it. Longer than I expected. He stopped. I honestly don't remember. Something tightened in my chest. Not pity. Just concern. You should fix that. Maybe. No. I shook my head. Definitely. He smiled again. I'll put you in charge of reminding me. I'm already reminding you. I know. And I'm listening. The waitress brought our drinks. For a while we simply watched people pass outside. It felt comfortable. Easy. Eventually Isaac spoke. You know what Tyler asked me yesterday? What? He asked if you were my best friend. I nearly choked on my coffee. What did you say? I said I didn't know. I laughed. Fair answer. He told me I was an idiot. Also fair. Isaac sighed dramatically. Apparently because I spend more time talking about you than anyone else. I looked at him. You talk about me? He notices things. So do you. I know. His expression softened. He likes you. I like him too. He won't admit it. I figured. He actually smiled after you talked to him the other day. I'm glad. Isaac nodded. So am I. A comfortable silence settled between us again. Then he asked a question so quietly I almost missed it. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why didn't you stop talking to me? I frowned. What do you mean? After everything. The packages. My nephew. The lying. I leaned back in my chair. I thought about it. You did. The first day. And after that, I realized none of those things were actually you. He looked down at his coffee. You still had every reason to walk away. I guess. So why didn't you? I searched for the right words. Because every conversation after that made me want to have another one. His eyes met mine. Neither of us spoke. Outside, someone hurried past carrying groceries. A dog pulled happily at its leash. A bus stopped across the street. The whole city kept moving. Inside the cafe, it suddenly felt very still. Isaac smiled. Not the polite smile he gave strangers. Not the amused smile he used when we joked. Something quieter. Warmer. I'm really glad you didn't. Neither was I. I realized that before I even had the chance to answer. That should have been enough. A good conversation, coffee, a quiet walk home. The kind of afternoon that leaves you smiling for no obvious reason. Instead, it made everything more complicated. Because once I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about Isaac. Not in some dramatic, movie-like way. Just little things. The way he always waited for me to start walking before crossing the street. The way he listened without interrupting. The way his eyes softened whenever Tyler came up in conversation, even when he sounded exhausted. It wasn't one big moment. It was 100 small ones. And somehow, they were adding up. A few days later, my phone buzzed just after 6. Isaac, busy? I smiled before I even realized I was smiling. Me, depends. Isaac, Tyler's staying at a friend's tonight. Me, congratulations? Isaac, I suddenly realized I don't know what adults do with free evenings. I laughed. Me, that's actually a little sad. Isaac, I know. Me, come over. 5 minutes later he knocked. This time he was carrying a grocery bag. I brought snacks. You sound nervous. I am. Why? He looked genuinely confused. I haven't had free time in months. So, what if I waste it? I stared at him. You can't waste one evening. I probably can. I shook my head. You're overthinking. I've heard that before. From Tyler. From you. I stand by it. He smiled. We ended up making dinner together. Or, more accurately, I cooked while Isaac followed instructions with remarkable concentration. Hand me the tomatoes. He handed me onions. No. Right. The tomatoes. I knew that. 5 minutes later, he almost added sugar instead of salt. I'm starting to understand why you order pizza. I'm doing my best. You are. I just don't know where anything goes. That's because you're reading labels upside down. He looked at the container. That explains a lot. I laughed so hard I had to lean against the counter. I can't believe you actually admitted that. I've accepted that my dignity isn't surviving tonight. Probably not. Dinner turned out surprisingly good. Mostly because I eventually stopped letting Isaac near anything important. You know, he said between bites, you're kind of bossy. I kept us from eating sweet pasta. Fair point. After dinner, we moved out to the back porch. The evening air was cool. The neighborhood was unusually quiet. Somewhere farther down the street, someone was mowing their lawn much later than anyone should. Isaac leaned back in the chair. I forgot this existed. What? Doing nothing. I looked over at him. You really have been working too much. It's not just work. I know. He sighed. Sometimes I feel guilty relaxing. Why? Because if I'm relaxing, I'm not helping someone. The answer came so naturally that I doubted he'd ever really examined it before. Isaac, who's helping you? He was quiet. Finally, he smiled without looking at me. I was hoping you wouldn't ask that. Too bad. I don't know. Exactly. A breeze moved through the trees, separating our yards. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then Isaac asked, can I tell you something embarrassing? Always. I almost canceled tonight. I turned toward him. Why? I kept thinking you'd eventually get tired of me. I blinked. What? You've only really known me because everything went wrong. I don't follow. The first impression wasn't exactly great. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Isaac, he looked over. The first impression I had of you was helping me carry a couch. He smiled faintly. I forgot about that. I didn't. You remember? You barely knew me. So, you still spent an hour helping. He looked down. I guess. Then months later you apologized for something that wasn't even your fault. It felt like it was. I know. You took responsibility. I had to. No. He frowned. You wanted to. He didn't answer. You know what my impression of you actually is? What? That you're the kind of person who keeps trying even when you're exhausted. His expression changed. Not dramatically. Just enough that I could tell those words had landed somewhere deep. I don't always succeed. I know. I've made mistakes. I know. I'm still figuring things out. So is everyone else. He laughed quietly. You make things sound simple. They're usually not. No. They're just easier when you stop pretending you have to carry everything alone. He looked at me for a long moment. I think I'm still learning that. I know. The silence that followed felt different from all the others we'd shared. Not awkward. Not uncertain. Just full. Like neither of us wanted to interrupt whatever had quietly settled between us. Finally, Isaac stood. I should head home. You live 20 feet away. I know. Big commute. The traffic is terrible. I walked him to the door anyway. As he stepped outside, he stopped and turned back. You know? What? I think Tyler was wrong. About what? He said you were my best friend. And Isaac smiled. I don't think that's what this feels like anymore. For one suspended second, neither of us moved. The words hung gently between us. Neither of us rushed to explain them. Neither of us pretended we didn't understand. Then, from somewhere next door, Tyler opened a window and called out loudly, "Uncle Isaac, did you seriously leave your phone charging in the kitchen again?" Isaac closed his eyes. Apparently I did. I laughed. You should probably rescue it. He smiled, shaking his head as he walked toward his house. I'll see you tomorrow, Levi. Tomorrow. I noticed he didn't say if. Only tomorrow. And somehow, that single word stayed with me long after my front door had closed. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee, which made absolutely no sense. I lived alone. For about 3 very confusing seconds, I genuinely wondered if someone had broken into my house just to make breakfast. Then my phone buzzed. Isaac, check your porch. I opened the front door. A cardboard drink carrier sat on the welcome mat with 2 coffees and a small paper bag from the bakery downtown. There was a sticky note attached. Payment for emotional damages caused by almost serving you dessert pasta. I laughed before I even picked it up. I looked toward Isaac's house. He was standing on his porch, pretending to water a plant that was already soaking wet. You know I can see you. I have no idea what you're talking about. The plant is drowning. It'll recover. You bribed me with pastries. I prefer the word thanked. I held up one of the cups. You remembered my order. You've ordered the same thing every time. You noticed. He gave me a look. I notice a lot of things. That much was definitely true. Thank you. You're welcome. He pointed toward the coffee. Drink it before it gets cold. Then he disappeared back inside before I could say anything else. I stood there smiling like an idiot. It was just coffee. Just breakfast. Just a thoughtful gesture. So why did it feel like so much more? That afternoon, I had to drive across town for work. By the time I got back, it was almost 7. As I turned onto my street, I immediately noticed flashing lights. My stomach dropped. A police car sat outside Isaac's house. I parked so quickly, I barely remembered to turn off the engine. Isaac was standing on the lawn talking to one of the officers. Tyler sat on the porch steps with his head in his hands. The second Isaac saw me, I could see the apology in his face. I walked over. What happened? Isaac let out a slow breath. Tyler got into a fight. I looked toward the teenager. He had a split lip. What kind of fight? Someone at school. The officer nodded politely. Nothing too serious. We just needed to make sure everyone involved was safe. I relaxed a little. So nobody's badly hurt? No. The officer smiled. Teenagers made some poor decisions. After another few minutes, the police left. Silence settled over the yard. Isaac sat down beside Tyler. Neither of them spoke immediately. Finally, Tyler muttered, I messed up. You did. I'm sorry. I know. I tried to walk away. Isaac nodded. I believe you. I frowned. You do? Tyler looked surprised too. Isaac rested his elbows on his knees. You still chose to fight. I know. But I also know you've been trying. Tyler swallowed hard. I don't want you to give up on me. Isaac looked at him with an expression I'd never seen before. Not frustration. Not disappointment. Just steady certainty. I'm not going anywhere. The words were quiet. Simple. But they hit me harder than I expected. Tyler looked away quickly, blinking several times. I don't make this easy. I never expected easy. Isaac reached over and briefly squeezed his shoulder. No speech. No lecture. Just reassurance. After a minute, Tyler stood. I'm gonna clean up. He disappeared inside. Isaac remained on the porch. I sat beside him. Neither of us said anything for a while. Finally, I asked, You okay? He laughed softly. No. Understandable. I'm tired. I know. I keep wondering if I'm doing enough. I looked toward the front door. I think he already answered that. Isaac frowned. What do you mean? He asked if you'd give up on him. Yeah. He already believes you care. Isaac stared quietly at the yard. I never had that growing up. I turned toward him. What? He smiled without much humor. Nobody ever told me they weren't leaving. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Everything suddenly made a little more sense. Why he carried responsibility so naturally. Why he worried constantly. Why he always seemed convinced he had to earn people's trust instead of expecting it. I'm sorry, I said. He shrugged gently. It was a long time ago. That doesn't mean it stops mattering. No. He looked over at me. It doesn't. The evening stretched quietly around us. A few porch lights flickered on across the neighborhood. Someone walked a golden retriever down the sidewalk. Life kept moving. Isaac rubbed his hands together. You know what's embarrassing? What? I was more nervous about you seeing the police car than I was about talking to the officers. I blinked. Why? I didn't want you thinking everything was falling apart again. I smiled gently. I don't. You don't. No. I think you're doing the best you can. He searched my face as if trying to decide whether I really meant it. I do mean it. His shoulders relaxed just a little. Thank you. We sat there another few minutes before I finally stood. I should let you get some rest. Probably. I took a couple of steps toward my house. Levi. I turned back. I'm glad you were here. The words were so quiet, I almost missed them. I smiled. I'm glad too. As I walked home, I realized something had shifted. A few weeks ago, Isaac had been the quiet neighbor next door. Now, without either of us planning it, we'd become the first people each of us looked for when something good or bad happened. And somewhere between coffee on the porch, fixing fences, and surviving stolen packages, he'd stopped feeling like just a neighbor. He'd become the person I wanted to tell about my day. That realization was both comforting and a little terrifying. The following week settled into something that almost felt normal. Not exciting, not dramatic, just comfortable. Every morning, one of us somehow ended up outside at exactly the same time. Sometimes I left for work just as Isaac was taking the trash bins to the curb. Sometimes he was getting his mail while I watered the flowers I'd finally managed to keep alive. It became an unspoken routine. Morning, coffee, always. One Friday evening, I came home carrying 2 heavy grocery bags. Before I even reached my porch, Isaac appeared from next door. You bought half the supermarket. They were having a sale. They were selling bricks. They're canned tomatoes. They weigh the same. Without waiting for permission, he took one of the bags from my hand. I can carry my own groceries. I know. Then why are you helping? Because you're pretending this isn't heavy. I wasn't pretending. You were making that face. What face? The one where you're determined to prove you don't need help. I stared at him. I have a face for that. You absolutely do. I couldn't argue. Mostly because he was right. Inside the house, he set the groceries on the counter. You bought enough pasta to survive winter. I like pasta. I've noticed. You judge me a lot. I observe. That's a nicer word. It is. As I unpacked everything, Isaac wandered toward the bookshelf in the living room. You bought another one. I looked over. What? Another history book. I've had a stressful week. So your solution was buying 600 more pages. It was discounted. He laughed. I don't think discounts are supposed to be therapy. They work surprisingly well. He picked up the book and read the back cover. I've actually wanted to read this. Really? He nodded. I never bought it. You can borrow it. He looked at me. You trust me with your books? I trust you with coffee. That's different. Not really. He smiled. I'll take good care of it. I know. The words slipped out naturally. I know. Not I think. Not probably. Just. I know. Isaac noticed too. His smile became quieter. Warmer. I'll still return it. I figured. That evening we ended up sitting on my back porch again. The sky had turned orange as the sun disappeared behind the trees. The neighborhood felt peaceful. You ever think about moving? I asked. Isaac considered the question. Sometimes. But he looked toward his house. It's Tyler's first place that actually feels stable. So you stay? Yeah. What about you? I moved around a lot growing up. So now, I think I wanted somewhere that finally felt like home. He nodded slowly. Does it? I looked around. The small backyard. The old wooden fence we'd repaired together. The porch where we'd spent countless evenings talking. It does now. The answer surprised both of us. Isaac smiled without looking away. I'm glad. A few minutes later, Tyler came outside carrying a soccer ball. You two are doing the porch thing again? The porch thing? I asked. He nodded. You sit there every week. Isaac frowned. We do. Tyler looked genuinely confused. You seriously haven't noticed? Neither of us answered. Tyler laughed. You guys are impossible. What did we do? You keep pretending you're just neighbors. Isaac and I exchanged a quick glance. We are neighbors, Isaac said. Tyler rolled his eyes. Sure. He bounced the soccer ball once. My coach asked if Uncle Isaac was seeing anyone. I watched Isaac immediately become suspicious. Why? I said I didn't think so. Thank you. But then Coach asked why he smiles every time his phone buzzes. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop myself from laughing. Isaac looked horrified. He said that. Yep. And what did you tell him? Tyler grinned. I said it depends who's texting. Isaac buried his face in one hand. I'm going inside. You embarrassed? Very. Tyler laughed all the way back toward the house. The screen door closed behind him. Silence settled over the porch. Then I heard Isaac sigh. I can't believe he said that. I can. You can. He notices people. Isaac looked over. So do you? He smiled helplessly. I guess he learned it somewhere. I think he learned more than that. Isaac's expression softened. He's doing better. He is. He apologized to the kid from school. Really? Isaac nodded. They both got detention. Fair. But afterward they actually talked. And they're not friends. But they're not enemies anymore. I smiled. That's progress. It is. He leaned back in his chair. I don't say this enough. What? Thank you. For what? For not giving up on him. I frowned. I didn't really do anything. You treated him like he could become better instead of deciding he already wasn't. I thought about that for a moment. I just talked to him. Exactly. He looked toward the darkening sky. A lot of people would have stopped there. His phone buzzed. He glanced down. A smile appeared almost immediately. I raised an eyebrow. What? You smiled. I did not. You absolutely did. It was Tyler. He texted you from inside the house. Isaac looked at the screen again and laughed. He wants to know where the TV remote is. Isn't he in the same house as the remote? Apparently, that's not important. What did you tell him? I told him to look under the couch. A second later, the phone buzzed again. Isaac read the message and laughed harder. What now? He says he already checked. You believe him? No. Good. Another message. Isaac shook his head. He found it. Where was it? Under the couch. I couldn't stop laughing. Isaac slipped the phone back into his pocket. You know? What? This feels nice. I looked at him. What does? He gestured vaguely between our houses. The ordinary part. No missing packages. No police. No disasters. Just coffee. Just conversations. He met my eyes. I didn't realize how much I'd missed ordinary. Neither had I. And sitting there beside him, listening to the sounds of a quiet neighborhood settling into another peaceful evening, I realized I wasn't hoping for anything dramatic anymore. I just wanted more evenings like this. Somehow, that felt even more important. Autumn arrived almost without either of us noticing. The mornings became colder. Leaves gathered along the sidewalks. Someone on our street started decorating for Halloween far too early, and Tyler complained every single day that the inflatable ghost looked creepy in a lazy way. Life settled into a rhythm. Tyler stayed out of trouble. Isaac slowly stopped apologizing every time something went wrong. I stopped pretending I didn't look toward the window whenever I heard his front door open. One Saturday morning, I was replacing the batteries in my smoke detector when the ladder slipped. It wasn't dramatic, just enough for me to lose my balance. I landed awkwardly on one foot. Ow. A minute later, someone knocked. I opened the door to find Isaac. I heard something fall. It was mostly my dignity. He looked down. You limping? A little. Without another word, he stepped inside. Sit. It's fine. Levi. Something about the way he said my name made arguing feel pointless. I sat. He crouched in front of the chair, looking at my ankle with complete concentration. Can you move it? I rotated my foot. It hurts. But I think it's just twisted. He nodded. Ice. I know. You were absolutely going to ignore it. Maybe. He smiled. I know. I watched him disappear into the kitchen. He somehow knew exactly where I'd hidden the ice packs. You've been here too much. He looked over his shoulder. Complaining? Not really. Good. He wrapped the ice pack in a towel before handing it to me. You've done this before. My college roommate thought skateboarding indoors was a good idea. Indoors. It ended exactly how you'd expect. I laughed. He sat down across from me. Neither of us spoke for a minute. Then he quietly asked, Can I tell you something? Always. He took a slow breath. I almost sold my house. What? A few months before we met. I stared at him. Why? I thought Tyler would be better off somewhere else. You really believe that? I believed he'd be better off with someone who knew what they were doing. And now? He looked toward the window. Now I think maybe he just needed someone who stayed. I smiled. He did. Isaac nodded. I think I needed that too. The room fell quiet again. Outside, I could hear Tyler laughing with someone down the street. It sounded lighter than it had weeks earlier. You changed his life, I said. Isaac shook his head immediately. No, you did. He changed mine too. I thought about that. Maybe he was right. Maybe they had both saved each other in different ways. A few days later, Tyler knocked on my door. You busy? Not really. He looked unusually nervous. I need advice. Oh. He rubbed the back of his neck. My uncle likes you. I nearly laughed. I know. No. He shook his head. I mean, likes you. Silence. I thought you knew. I wasn't sure. Tyler blinked. Seriously? I didn't want to assume. He looked genuinely amazed. You two are the most clueless adults I've ever met. Thanks. I'm serious. He folded his arms. He smiles every time you text. I've noticed. He talks about you constantly. I've noticed. He literally bought the coffee you like because he remembered you saying they were out once. He what? Tyler sighed dramatically. Please fix this. I laughed. Fix what? My uncle deserves to be happy. The sentence wiped the smile from my face. Tyler looked toward his house. I haven't seen him like this in years. He looked back at me. And I think it's because of you. That evening I knocked on Isaac's door. He opened it almost immediately. Everything okay? Yeah. You look serious. I am. He stepped aside. I walked inside. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I smiled. I have a question. Okay. When you bought me coffee, he looked confused. Was it really because of emotional damages? He stared at me, then laughed quietly. No. 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 Then why? He looked down. I wanted to do something that would make you smile. There it was. Simple. Honest. Exactly the way Isaac always spoke. I took one step closer. You know? What? I've been trying very hard not to assume anything. So have I. I think we've both been making this unnecessarily difficult. He smiled. I think you're right. I like spending time with you. I know. You do? I was hoping. I look for excuses to come outside. I noticed. I think about texting you before I actually do. I noticed that too. I laughed. You notice everything. Only the important things. For a second, we simply stood there smiling at each other. No dramatic speeches. No perfect movie moment. Just two people who had somehow arrived at exactly the same place. I like you too, Levi. Those 5 words felt wonderfully ordinary. Wonderfully real. I reached for his hand. Slowly. Giving him every chance to pull away if he wanted. He didn't. Our fingers intertwined naturally. Comfortably. Like they'd already decided this long before we had. A laugh interrupted us. We both turned. Tyler stood at the kitchen entrance holding a bag of chips. I knew it. Isaac sighed. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. You were spying? I live here. That's not an answer. It kind of is. I started laughing. Isaac shook his head. I'll never win. Nope. Tyler grinned. So. Does this mean I can stop pretending you two are just neighbors? Isaac looked at me. I squeezed his hand once. He smiled. Yeah. I think it does. Tyler threw one fist into the air. Finally, he disappeared back toward the living room, muttering something about taking forever. Isaac closed his eyes. I can't believe that just happened. I can. He'll never let us forget it. Definitely not. We both laughed. A few minutes later, we walked out onto the porch together. The same porch where we'd spent countless evenings talking. Across the small front lawn sat my house. Between them stood the fence we'd repaired together. It suddenly struck me how everything had started. A stolen package. A teenager who needed another chance. A neighbor I'd never really known. Sometimes life doesn't introduce the right people in the right way. Sometimes it hides them behind misunderstandings, bad timing, and ordinary days. If my first package had never disappeared, I probably would have lived next to Isaac for years without ever truly meeting him. Instead, I found someone who made ordinary evenings feel like the best part of the day. Someone who remembered my coffee order. Someone who noticed when I was pretending I didn't need help. Someone who quietly became home before either of us realized it. And every time another package appeared safely on my porch after that, I smiled. Because, strangely enough, the best thing I ever received wasn't delivered in a cardboard box. It had been living next door all along.